He's a graduate of Booker High School and the University of South Florida. His family is known for their connection to the community through spiritual and material support. Harvest Church has been around for over 30 years, and in recent years, the son of founders Jim and Peggy Miner, Dan, has taken the reins, and Dan's sister, Erin, is CEO and heads up Harvest House, an organization, and this is from their website, champions hope and transforms lives through supportive and affordable housing, addiction recovery programs, and food security. Pastor Dan Miner, welcome to Suncoast, people.
I am so glad to be here with you.
So what's it like following in the shadow of your sister Erin? He says with a wink. I've met Erin, and she's a terrific person.
It is really, really horrible. No, she is an amazing human being, and the two of us could not be more different. Mm-hmm. And for years, growing up in a family of five, we seemed to have the most rivalry between us, and now we are the ones working the most closely together, and I love it. Yeah. She's amazing. We complement each other, and she's great at what she does. I think she's the best nonprofit CEO in town, but I'm biased.
Sure. Well, she's a very smart person, and yep. Like I said, I had the pleasure, the honor of meeting her, and yep. I'm going to get her on the show in an upcoming episode as well.
I negotiate her contract, so
all right, you're her agent too. Boy, what don't you do around there? You know, we talk about change a lot, and that's one of the things that I talk about, and there's sort of the focus of Suncoast people climbing that second mountain. And in my mind, there are two kinds of change that occur. There's the external change, where we respond to the world around us. And then there's the internal change that is something that comes from deep inside of us. What do you think about that comparison?
You know, Friar Richard Rohr, if you've ever read any of his books, but he wrote a book called Breathing Underwater, and he's really brilliant when he talks about the human condition, but he kind of splits life up into, and it doesn't necessarily happen down the middle. It can happen the last 10% of your life, and where that change happens. But he talks about, and I don't remember how he describes the terms for it, but he talks about two different phases of life. First phase being finding out, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Who am I going to do it with? You know, answering these fundamental questions that begin to set up the framework of your life. Essentially building the bucket or building the tank or the box. Mm-hmm. And then the second half of your life being, what am I going to put in the box? And that moment of change that I think really ties well in with the idea of a second mountain, of going, okay, I've established this is the direction for my life. This is who I'm going to do it with. These are my people that are around me. This is kind of the container. Now, what am I going to put in the container? And that fundamental question of beginning to transform our way of thinking to less about the what and more about like meaning and transformative ideas and what is this all going to mean in the end to the rest of the world, my legacy, my work, my love, my relationships. And I think that's probably the question or the place where a lot of people get caught up. I think that's where people have their midlife crises. That's where people have that moment of going, and some people are able to transition into it well and some aren't. But I think change for me is not only inevitable, but it is empowering, and it is always a great opportunity to feel uncomfortable, but also to move you forward in a way that brings new meaning to why we're here.
Did you always know that you were going to follow this path that your father established with the church?
No, I didn't. I actually was the last of the five of us probably that you would have picked because I got in the most trouble and, mischievous. And I saw the way my dad struggled financially, working 3 jobs, especially when we were young, did everything, mortgaged his own house, my mom and dad did, to start the first part of Harvest House and buy a home. They worked incredibly hard, and for most of my childhood, we didn't have much of anything. And I thought, I don't know if this is a way to live or what I want to do with my life. And I thought, I don't want to do that with my life. I was actually going to go to law school, took my LSATs, applied to Stetson, a couple of law schools I wanted to go to, and something happened internally that I went, I think I've got to do something different than
So
what I
this
planned.
was an internal change and
Yeah.
not an external change.
Yeah, an internal change that became an external change.
Interesting.
But
Okay.
it happened here first. It happened over the course of about 3 or 4 nights where I couldn't sleep well, and I just felt this unsettling feeling every time I thought about following the path and career towards law, and kept feeling like I was supposed to transition into something that seemed to potentially, for my life, not making this blanket statement about other attorneys, but for my life seemed to be something that would be more meaningful.
And so you chose this life following your faith
Yep.
and following service.
Yep. But I never went to seminary. Never went to a Bible college or a Bible school. I had a lot of catch up to do when it came to that, but I had a passion to communicate to an audience of people a message of hope, and one that was as authentic as I could make it, and one that wasn't wrapped and shrouded in religious tradition that oftentimes seems to make God feel distant.
So dogma is not necessarily a word you would use to describe
No.
your church.
No, because I think that God and the idea of God looks different to everybody, and they experience God differently. I almost said him, but I even like to take the gender out of it, because in the New Testament it says that there's no male or female, Jew nor Greek, and on and on. In other words, those kind of defining labels are stripped away with New Testament kind of theology, and with God, I think that He is the perfect. She is, they are. Yeah, the perfect blend of both masculine and feminine. There is no gender in God. That's a hard concept for a lot of traditional Christians to imagine. But the Holy Spirit, for instance, traditionally we see the female role in many relationships, not always, but traditionally as the nurturer, right? And the Holy Spirit is described as a nurturer in the scriptures, but yet we always assign this male gender to all things that are God, whether it's Father, Son, or Spirit. And so things like that we go, why are we taking what has been served up to us for hundreds of years, but in my lifetime for decades, and just saying, okay, that's it. Because in the dogma of the Bible is clear type, theology, we have done horrible things. We have marginalized groups. We have the mainstream, specifically mainstream Christianity, has been on the wrong side of women's rights. They've been on the wrong side of civil rights. Been on the wrong side of LGBTQ rights, and eventually many of the denominations come around to it, but they rarely lead the way.
Well, you can also go back centuries to that little pesky Spanish Inquisition.
Right. But how much longer are we going to let these kind of things repeat, these historical things repeat? And that for me is we have to stop believing the Bible is clear. And I think it's 2 Peter, it says, slaves obey your master even if they beat you without cause. And then it goes on to say, and just like that, women obey your husbands.
Have there been moments along this road so far that you've gone, what am I doing here? Am I questioning, my own faith?
Sure. I think I try to stay away from speaking negatively too much about other people that are of the same faith. But I one time saw a young lady who was part of the LGBTQ community, had a bumper sticker on the back of her car. That was a definitive moment for me, I have to tell you. And it said, God, please save us from your followers. And it was so, without having a conversation, just the type of bumper stickers on the back of her car, you know, her kind of, I knew exactly what she was communicating. And I have oftentimes asked myself the question, am I ever going to make a difference? Am I ever going to shift the needle a little bit? Is the machine too big and powerful? You know, and that for me has been, I went through a really tough divorce, which I don't know if you know, but that's not super popular to do when you're a minister.
Right.
Went through COVID. Was very hard because I was literally in the middle of the divorce when COVID hit. So the church was shut down. We did online services for 5 months.
Let's talk about that a little bit more about COVID and what it did, because it was as big, if not bigger, than 9/11 as far as major world events, major events that affected us in our day-to-day lives here in this country. And what happened to your church?
Well, I mean, you go to online services, and then we had 5 months of that. Then we had about 2 or 3 months of drive-in services. From a numbers perspective, our income, like what comes into the plate, the offering, dropped, don't quote me, but estimatedly dropped somewhere between 50 and 70%.
That's a big drop. You survived. How did you survive?
Well, I think we survived because I am very charismatic and really well liked. No, that's not why.
And modest too. Very modest.
No, I don't know, Bob. I don't know. I could give you an answer, but I don't know if I would believe it myself. I think we survived because we were also simultaneously becoming very clear that we had a very distinct mission in the community, and that was to start to make it well known that any groups of people that had traditionally been marginalized by the majority of religious institutions, that we wanted to do things differently.
Well, and you made that very clear, abundantly clear, that you are a Christian church that is very welcoming of people of all walks of life,
Yes.
including the LGBTQ plus people, community, and that is not very common, especially among the what I would refer to as the non-denominational Christian church. How have you navigated that?
Well as we could, but probably terribly. It's just, as silly as it sounds, you go through a divorce, a bad divorce, not pleasant. I know no divorces are pleasant, but it was not pleasant. It took about 4 years for us. I have 2 wonderful girls, daughters, amazing. So you got that going on, and you think, man, that must be horrible to go through as a minister. Or COVID, that just completely flipped everything upside down and made us basically completely change the way we did church 5 major times in a year. I mean, everything. All the policies and procedures and structures and instructions to volunteers, everything changed 5 major times in a year. You have that. None of that, even added together, came close to the napalm bomb that was dropped, or what felt like it, when we decided to become public. Privately and in private conversations, we had been there a long time. But to be publicly, distinctly clear about our inclusion and affirmation of the LGBTQ community.
Who dropped that napalm bomb?
Well, I was the one that might have pushed the lever, but I had the support of my family and our board.
But who dropped the bomb on you?
Oh, you mean the repercussions from it all?
The repercussions. I mean, you didn't make the bomb. You didn't.
No,
You
Bob,
created this somebody must have.
I'm very careful to go there, but I will say that it is some, not all, but some of the religious community out there. I had a group of pastors that got together to sit me down when I hired a guy that was running our office, stuff, who was an openly gay man. I had a group of about 12 pastors that came to visit me and basically said, what are you doing? I had a lot of very prominent families that attended the church leave over it. Had really great conversations with all of them, but they just couldn't get there, and that's okay. It was a combination of a lot of things.
Yeah, but is it really okay that they would just up and leave you like that over something like this?
I think they're doing the best with what they have in the moment. But do I oftentimes have to check my own anger over it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
I have to check myself. I have to realize that I was once there, and it wasn't that long ago. If a decade ago, I would have been with them. A decade's not that long.
Okay, I want to touch on this, but we need to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be back in just a moment, and we're going to follow up on that idea, because again, this whole show is really about change and how we face change. We'll be right back. This program is made possible through your support. Please subscribe, follow, and like on these platforms. You can also support us by going to patreon.com/suncoastpeople. Thank you. And we're back with Pastor Dan Miner of Harvest Church, and we're talking about change. And right before we took a little break, you were talking about how you had a fundamental shift about 10 years ago or so, and how you perceived LGBTQ people and perhaps other aspects of the church. What was that change about?
First, I have two siblings, Matt and Aaron, who are both gay and married, and that had an impact on me. My brother Matt was the first one to come out. He sat across the table from me. I'll never forget it to this day. Still makes me emotional. And he looked me in the eyes and he just said, first of all, he started to weep. I thought he was going to tell me he killed somebody and buried the body. It was that kind of like travailing almost.
Yeah.
Just wept. And he couldn't spit out the words. I'm thinking, what in the world could cause this much pain in somebody? Mm-hmm. And because I don't understand, being straight, I don't understand that pain. I just don't, and he looked across the table and he said, I'm gay. And this was a little more than 10 years ago. And I'll never forget it because we talked it through and I said, okay. I said, well, let's talk about that. And he said, for there's 4 boys and 1 girl in my family. So obviously the 3 of us are straight and married to a woman. Not the same woman, let's make that clear.
You're not like a harem or
no,
something.
No.
Okay.
There's
Gotcha.
enough rumors going around, Bob. He said for most of my life, even into my teen years, I would weep almost every night and cry and beg God to let me love the way my brothers love. Mm-hmm. And nothing happened. So I thought, as someone who, is deeply holds on to their faith, I thought either God's not real, right? Or he's not, or she's not who we think they are. Because you read how loving our, we use Heavenly Father, but Heavenly Mother, whatever, we read that and would give his only begotten Son, and this totally just loving, hopeful, would give anything for unconditional love. There's a scripture that says he loved us, or we love him because he first loved us, like this idea of the love was poured out before we ever reciprocated or could give anything back. And here is a young man confused in that moment, trying to wrestle with his sexuality, begging this divine force out there to change him, make him like his brothers for 10 plus years every night, or let's say 5 nights a week, and nothing changes and happens. So either we misunderstand how he actually feels about gay people. Excuse me using the pronoun he, but that's what I'm used to. Or it's not real, or if he is real, then this is cruel. And I had to come to the conclusion that I wasn't ready to give up on the idea of God existing. So I had to shift and go, maybe we missed something. Maybe something, and the way this has been communicated over time has been changed or warped or adjusted, and maybe we missed something. And we could do a 2-hour show on everything we missed. And I could go into the Greek and the Hebrew and the idea that 1946 in the RSV version of the Bible was the first time the word homosexual came up. Up to that point, no English Bible had the word homosexual in it. 1946.
Yeah.
That's pretty far along.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of data out there that shows that this was never the intention of the original text. In addition to the fact that even if it was the intention of the original text, I believe that doing the right thing by human beings, this whole idea of human rights, trumps any of our theology.
How did that change how you approach your ministry and transform your church?
It doesn't happen gradually. Something clicks in your brain. You see that their love between one another the same way you see your love for the person maybe that you're with. It just happens, it changes, and you go, oh, okay, how did I miss this for so long? And once that thing clicks, once my mind kind of expanded around and wrapped around that idea, I was like, oh, okay. And then I had to remind myself, it took me a long time to get there, and I need to be patient with other people. But I'm passionate about communicating the idea of the divine to people to realize that there's no hate in love. There's no fear in love. There's no shame and manipulation in love. Love is love, and it is beautiful, whether it's coming from the divine or it's for one another. And that idea is something that I've kind of devoted my life to trying to communicate.
Speaking of love, you have a new life now, a new love.
Yeah.
And something not too long ago happened. What was that?
Well, at the taping of this show, we got engaged about 36 hours ago.
Okay.
Two days ago. This evening, it'll be 2 nights ago in New York City. I did a 24-hour crazy, like I'm telling you, I'm an unorthodox person. A whirlwind 24-hour quick trip to New York City. She was there with her daughter. They have this little tradition every year to go up there and have some mother-daughter time, and I went up there and surprised her in Rockefeller Center. It ended up being like something out of a movie. It was raining, sprinkling.
So we're going to see this next year on the Hallmark channel.
Yes, you are.
Oh, okay.
It was sprinkling. The tree was lit. Everybody's dressed in their winter clothes.
Yeah.
It's New York City Christmas time, and she's walking on the other side of the street by the tree, and she doesn't see me, and her daughter's trying to direct her towards me because we've flown up to surprise her, and I start calling out her name, and her name is Robin. So I'm hailing like from across the street, Robin, and it's like it's echoing through the streets. It was like all of the things were happening. I didn't necessarily plan it that way, and she heard her name, and she's looked around. We have it on video. It's great. And she's looking around, and then she spots me across the street, and then her daughter has to say, "Go!" like go. And I brought my daughter up there with me, Lainey, who traveled up there with me, and so we are engaged. And I will say this: my ex is a wonderful mother and a wonderful human, and I don't regret the time that we spent together at all. I don't. This relationship for me has completely transformed my life. It's made me softer. It's made me easier to be around. If I have one more now you're going to hear a pastor cuss now, one more damn person come up to me and tell me that I'm a better person since I've been with her. I don't know if I can take it anymore, Bob, because I'm like, was I that bad before? What's going on? And we just are truly, if there's ever such a word as soulmates, we are that.
You know what we're going to do? Can you hang on for a few more minutes
Yes.
with me? Because there are a couple more topics I want to talk
Sure.
about. And what we're going to do is split this show into a couple of episodes. And so make sure to watch part 2, because we're going to talk about change within ourselves, change from outside of ourselves, and whether another person can actually change you. And we'll be back.